And welcome back, boys and girls, for another special edition of the Patreon series. And joining me right now is a guest that many of you are quite familiar with. That, of course, is Mr. Jim Fetzer, or as we like to call him, the Freight Train, a former Marine Corps officer, a graduate of Princeton, who majored in philosophy and, of course, earned his PhD in the history and philosophy of science. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. James Fetzer. How are you, sir?
Oh, Michael, good. The United States is effing up massively, but then we had to expect that. Remember, Barack Obama observed, never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to F things up. And even though I don't think this is the real Joe, he's effing things up pretty well.
Oh, yes. They are definitely destroying this nation here. And, you know, to be honest with you, I don't like to go with either side of the coin here, but it's pretty evident that Joe Biden's administration really has ruined the country in a way, in a large way.
Michael, I think if you assume that the acting president of the United States is George Soros, everything makes sense. The open borders, the supply chain problems, defunding the police, releasing criminals out, not prosecuting crimes, all these things, including now, of course, is skyrocketing cost of gasoline. These are going to devastate the Democratic Party in the midterms, and I don't think there's any way to escape. Biden is trying to shift blame onto Putin, of course, but the gas prices were already skyrocketing. After all, it was he who canceled the XL pipeline as his first act upon taking office, and then restricted the use of public lands for drilling. Trump, among his accomplishments, perhaps one of the most significant was to make us energy independent. He also, of course, got the economy going, clamped down on the border. He was doing a whole lot of good for the United States. And because Biden is allowing endless streams of illegal immigrants across the border and promising them citizenship and a host of other benefits, Hispanics who are here, who worked years to attain citizenship and to earn benefits from the United States, are simply outraged, and they're shifting to the Republican Party by the droves.
Sorry about that. I was dropping out.
Not a problem.
Yes.
And of course, right now, gasoline is at the highest price ever recorded. The average cost of a gallon of unleaded hit $4.17, according to the AAA. Many are seeing $5 a gallon gasoline. Biden has announced that his administration is banning the importation of oil, liquefied natural gas, and coal, but we don't actually import liquefied natural gas or coal. But the fact is, by banning gasoline, the price is going to go even higher. It's rather stunning what's taking place here. The European Union, by contrast, cannot cut itself off from Russian oil and gas because it relies on imports for 90% of its gas and 97% of its oil products, where Russia supplies 40% of Europe's gas and 25% of its oil. So it will make China and the European Union the largest purchasers of Russian energy. I think this is really a remarkable development. Even Germany is sticking with Putin for its oil and gas. This is very significant. Bear in mind, one of the principal motives for wanting Ukraine to provoke Russia into an invasion so they could assail Russia and move to cut off gas and energy between Russia and Germany, particularly the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, was to exacerbate tensions, to reawaken a Cold War, to retain the viability of NATO, because, Michael, this growing close business commercial association between Russia and Germany is going to lead to a reduction in anxieties about any Russian invasion of Europe. It's going to mean NATO is obviously antiquated and no longer necessary for the defense of Europe, and that these European nations no longer need to expend vast sums of money by buying expensive U.S. military hardware. So the military-industrial complex had been very much in the background here.
Very busy,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say they've been very busy indeed, starting up this new war. I guess they want more money now.
To wit, who wants the money, Michael?
The military-industrial complex.
Oh, yeah, of course.
They're fiending for more money.
They've been responsible for expanding NATO from 16 to 30 nations. This was in the wake of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, in spite of the fact that the United States had issued solemn declarations, including by the then Secretary of State James Baker, that the West would not encroach 1 inch to the east, and instead we have sought to militarize all these nations, as I say, 14 since this began, all of which is in violation of these solemn agreements, for which, therefore, Vladimir Putin, who understands the history, can no longer trust or believe in the United States. If you go back and read his statement of February 23rd, he made a masterful explanation of why Russia had to intervene with a special military operation into Ukraine, not only because there had been 8 years of nonstop shelling of eastern Ukraine by the Ukrainian government, which came into office because of a coup executed by Victoria Nuland using $5 billion of taxpayer money to get out a pro-Russian president and install a Western puppet. And Donbass and Luhansk, which are Russian-speaking, have been under constant bombardment ever since. Thousands of people have been killed, but the world hasn't paid any attention whatsoever. So, having discovered that a lot of very nasty business was going on in Ukraine, among the most important aspects of which is bioweapon warfare laboratories there that the United States has denied even existed, Putin, understanding history and his responsibility to protect the national security of Russia, felt the necessity to intervene, especially when there was ongoing talk of trying to convert Ukraine into a NATO nation, which would have put all these forces right on Russia's border. In fact, there's too much of that already. What the West seems not to understand, Michael, is that Russia has far superior military equipment. They have the best anti-missile missiles. They have the best anti-submarine torpedoes. They have the best anti-ship missiles. They fly in kind of a corkscrew pattern. They're virtually impossible to defeat. Not only that, but Russia has a prevalence in electronic warfare where they can neutralize the computerized components on our warships and planes. There was an incident a few years back, you may or may not recall, where the USS Donald Cole was in the Black Sea or the Crimean, and when a Russian plane approached, they found all their fire direction systems and communication had been frozen by electronic warfare equipment on the Russian plane, such that the ship became known as the Donald Duck, a sitting duck, and hundreds of sailors got out of the Navy because they could see they would have no chance whatsoever in dealing with Russia. Now, we've been subjected to a veritable barrage of propaganda from the United States, claiming White House, here's just a day or two ago, White House warns Russia could use chemical weapons in Ukraine. That's actually from the 9th. Today is the 10th. Yesterday, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, yesterday, warned of the potential for Russia to use chemical weapons in Ukraine after Moscow alleged the U.S. was housing biological weapons on Ukrainian territory. Psaki called the claim from Russia false and preposterous and warned it could serve as a pretext for the Russians to deploy chemical weapons in their assault on Ukraine. It's a kind of disinformation operation we've seen repeatedly from the Russians over the years in Ukraine and in other countries, which have been debunked. An example of the types of false pretexts we've been warning the Russians would invent. Also, Psaki continued, Russia has a track record of accusing the West of the very violations that Russia itself is perpetrating. In December, Russia falsely accused U.S. of deploying contractors with chemical weapons in Ukraine, she continued. This is all an obvious ploy by Russia to try to justify its further premeditated, unprovoked, and unjustified attack on Ukraine. Now that Russia has made these false claims and China has seemingly endorsed them, we should all be on the outlook for Russia to use biological or chemical weapons in Ukraine or to create a false flag operation using them. It's a very clear pattern. Well, guess what?
Oh, my.
Victoria Nuland went into Congress and testified. Listen to what Tucker has to say. He's been all over this, Michael. Check this out.
Yeah, welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. If you had told us just 4 days ago that the Biden administration was funding secret biolabs in Ukraine, of all places, we would not have believed you. Yeah, I don't think we're going to put that on TV. No thanks. Then if you told us that not only did the administration fund these secret biolabs in Ukraine, but that they then failed to secure the deadly contents of those labs before the Russian invasion, an invasion they knew was coming, an invasion they helped encourage. If you had told us that 4 days ago, we would have dismissed you as a nut. It was just too preposterous. We would not want anything to do with a story like that. There was no way it could be true. Too far out. In any case, we already knew for a fact that that story was false. How do we know that? Because we read USA Today, America's newspaper. Within hours of the Russian invasion, USA Today published a rebuttal to all those crazies who are yammering on about secret Ukrainian biolabs. Here was the headline. Fact check. False claim of U.S. biolabs in Ukraine tied to Russian disinformation campaign. So if you look carefully at the story, and we did, because we were interested, you notice that this fact check was sourced to Ukrainian government unnamed officials and then Biden State Department officials. So these are not exactly objective sources on this subject, but still, the story seemed definitive. It was totally emphatic. Quote, Russia has teamed up with China to further amplify the false claim of U.S. labs in Ukraine. Okay, USA Today says it's Russian disinformation. Maybe it is. On to the next story. But the fact checks didn't stop. That was weird. We kept seeing the same fact check again and again. It was almost like, despite endless official clarifications, some people refused to believe the Biden administration. They preferred Russian propaganda instead. And we assume they must be QAnon members. We assume that because Foreign Policy magazine told us that. According to Foreign Policy, QAnon, whatever that is, was frantically disseminating, quote, false claims of U.S. biowarfare labs in Ukraine. Those labs obviously didn't exist. It was all just another lie from the Russians who lie for a living. Then the European Union weighed in, throwing its credibility behind the same claim. These are conspiracy theories, the EU told us. They're lies spread by Putin. An EU spokesman then reminded us that, quote, the credibility of information provided by the Kremlin is in general very doubtful and low. That was good to know. Quote, Russian disinformation has a track record of promoting manipulative narratives about biological weapons and alleged secret labs. Yeah, we're not going to do a segment about secret labs in Ukraine. Last thing we want to do on this show is traffic in Russian disinformation spread by QAnon. So we took a pass on that story. And that's where things stood until yesterday, when we happened to tune into a hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Victoria Nuland was testifying, so we were interested. Nuland's one of the people who brought us the Iraq War, never apologized for that, and kept getting promoted, because that's how D.C. works. Victoria Nuland is now Joe Biden's Undersecretary of State in charge of Ukraine, and she knows a lot about Ukraine. In 2014, Victoria Nuland engineered a coup in Ukraine in the name of democracy, of course. So she's a highly informed source about Ukraine. So she was having this colloquy with Senator Marco Rubio of Florida during her testimony. And at one point, Rubio took a tack that we were not expecting at all. He asked Nuland if Ukraine had biological weapons. We'd never imagined Ukraine would have biological weapons. Why would Ukraine have bioweapons? So it seemed like a pretty strange question. But it wasn't half as shocking as the answer he got. Watch what Victoria Nuland said.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
Oh. Does Ukraine have biological weapons? Ukraine has biological research facilities. What? You mean secret biolabs? Like the secret biolabs Ukraine definitely doesn't have? Ukraine has those? Yes, it does. And not only does Ukraine have secret biolabs, Tori Newland said, whatever they're doing in those labs is so dangerous and so scary that she is, quote, quite concerned that the so-called research material inside those biolabs might fall into the hands of Russian forces. Trying to use profanity on the air to describe our reaction, our jaws drop. Let's leave it there. Under oath in an open committee hearing, Tori Newland just confirmed that the Russian disinformation they've been telling us for days is a lie and a conspiracy theory and crazy and immoral to believe is in fact totally and completely true. Whoa. You don't hear things like that every day in Washington. Talk about a showstopper. And a dozen questions instantly jump to mind. What exactly are they doing in these secret Ukrainian biolabs? Ukraine is the poorest country in Europe. It's hardly a hotbed of biomedical research. We're assuming these weren't pharmaceutical labs, probably not developing new leukemia drugs. From your answer, Tori Newland, we would assume, because you all but said it, that there's a military application to this research, that they were working on bioweapons. Again, your answer suggests that. Why would we fund something like that in Ukraine? And why didn't you secure the contents of these biolabs before the Russians arrived, as you knew they would? And then why did you go out of your way to lie to the American public about all of this? If the, quote, research materials in these labs were to escape somehow, and you seem very concerned about that, what would be the effect on Ukraine and then on the rest of the world? How can we prepare for the consequences of that, this thing that you're worried about? Shouldn't we be preparing? Because as it turns out, we've just spent the last 2 years living with a pathogen that began in another foreign biolab funded by the United States government secretly. So this question is on our mind. It seems fair. And that's some of what we would have asked if we were U.S. senators, which we're not. Yes, there's a time limit be damned, because this is kind of important. But Rubio did not ask those questions. Instead, he changed the subject and told us once again that Vladimir Putin is bad. Watch.
If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
In other words, caught with our pants down in a blatant lie that's been massively propagandized with the full force of the American government, extensive statements denying the fact of the matter from the press secretary for the President of the United States. They continue to try to salvage the situation by claiming that, in your opinion, if anything were to come of this, would you have any doubt it was Russia's fault? This is just insulting beyond belief, Michael, and exposes the mainstream media and the government as lying baldly to the American people about an issue of enormous significance. Remember, they're talking about a biological development of pathogens in a foreign lab where we've just lived through a couple of years of the consequences of biological pathogens developed in a foreign lab. I mean,
that's insane.
This is stunning.
First of all, I got to say, Jim, I'm quite surprised that Tucker would be talking about this, where they would give him the green light to discuss this sort of thing. And of course, yeah, with the pandemic and COVID-19, just remember how long ago that was already out there, that this was created in a biolab, mostly here in America, and of course back in China. You know, these sort of this was a lab experiment going back and forth, and we sent it a long time ago, and now we have this mess. And given the fact that Ukraine is a corrupt country. Basically, we've known this for a long time. Even a few years ago, the media was covering Ukraine in not the best light, even saying themselves in the media that Ukraine was so corrupt. Now we are cheering for them so much. It's quite repulsive what's going on.
Well, mind you, I have a blog about this with a map showing location of these biolabs on my blog at jamesfetzer.org.
I've seen that,
Boon's
yeah.
Ukraine and biowarfare conspiracy theories at jamesfetzer.org, where you can listen to Tucker. His whole presentation ran 16 minutes. We only heard about 5.5 here, Michael, but I wanted to share it because
no, thank you.
Tucker's been doing completely brilliant work on some of these issues. He's been exposing January 6th as a sham. Here is another. How the whole gas situation is manufactured by the Biden administration and they're trying to shift blame. Tucker has been doing a brilliant job.
Yeah, usually I don't put over Tucker, to be honest, but I'm kind of shocked and quite surprised and respect him now after that one. And yes, this came out a while back, Jim, about the whole map of the strikes going on these biolabs in the Ukraine that were funded by the U.S. And of course, everyone thought that was, too hokey. It was bullshit, they thought. And now we are starting to realize it was not bullshit at all, Jim.
No, you're absolutely right. And I tell you, I recommend 1 hour of television, namely Tucker Carlson's show. Here, Central Time Zone comes on at 7, Eastern Time Zone at 8. 1 hour on Fox. That I recommend. He's doing a terrific job on a whole host of issues. You may or may not have missed it when he brought on Tony Bilolinsky during the first debate, when Bilolinsky had been the financial manager for the Biden operation involving his brother Jim and his son Hunter. And when during the first debate, Biden was claiming he had nothing to do with any of this, Bilolinsky virtually jumped out of his seat. Tucker did a brilliant interview with him. He did both a long and a short. He put the short on the regular show, but he had the longer. He's doing a whole series of lengthy interviews about very important figures that no one else is doing, Michael. So I'm very glad to see you reconsidering your opinion about Tucker. In my opinion, he is the one worthy journalist on mainstream or cable today, and he's got the largest cable audience of anyone. They have just added Jesse Waters, by the way, with his show preceding Tucker, and Jesse's being very well received as well. But I regard Tucker as doing the yeoman work on this and many other issues.
Oh, yes. After that, I would have to say he's doing quite well.
Now, Michael, the ramifications are going to be enormous. For example, here's a brand new report today. Russia accuses U.S. of covering up violations of the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention, calls to strengthen the Bioweapons Treaty. Russia declared that the U.S. and Ukraine have covered up violations of the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention. This comes after Russia discovered biolaboratories in Ukraine and after State Department official Victoria Nuland confirmed in her testimony on Tuesday that the U.S. has biolabs in Ukraine. A Biological Weapons Convention, or Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention, is a disarmament treaty that effectively bans biological and toxic weapons by prohibiting their development, production, acquisition, transfer, stockpiling, and use. The convention banning the use of biological weapons was ratified by 143 nations, but lacked means of insurance compliance. And the U.S. rejected Biological Weapons Convention protocol, according to a report posted on the NIH website dated 2001. Here's what we get from RT. An international treaty banning bioweapons needs to be strengthened with a compliance verification mechanism, contrary to the U.S. position on the issue, Moscow said on Wednesday. The call comes in the wake of the reported discovery of evidence there were lethal pathogens at Pentagon